Bon après-midi à tous, les amis. Welcome to another one of ACFO's Webinar Wednesdays. As usual, I'm Danny Richard, hosting from my house in Gatineau, Quebec. We're all self-isolating. We're all wondering what's going on with COVID-19. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Today's this topic will be staffing. More specifically, staffing complaints, staffing actions, any questions that you might have. Very happy. I'm joined by two of our labor relation advisors. Let's pan over to them. First, we have Grant Bolin. Grant, good morning.
Good morning, Grant Bolin. I'm a labor relations advisor with ACFO, coming to you live from Westboro in Ottawa.
Thank you very much, Grant. We also have Danielle Viel. Bonjour, Danielle.
Bonjour, Danielle Viel, conseillère en relation de travail ici de Canada Sud.
Thank you to both of you. So these are our guests for today. We'll be talking about staffing. More specifically, we'll be looking what are the recourses that you have as an ACFO member if you'd like to file a staffing complaint. So if you have an issue with staffing, you can file like the formal recourse, which is a staffing complaint. But the other avenue, the one we tend to prefer, is working the relationships and to maybe use the informal process instead of the formal one. So Grant and Danielle will be speaking to both of those. But first, I think it's necessary to give you an update on COVID-19. Again, we are all self-isolating. You're all teleworking for the most part, I believe. Here is the latest. ACFO will be sending out today, actually perhaps during this call, an update to members on what an eventual return to work would look like. As we've mentioned, ACFO is working very closely with the other unions and OCRO, the Office of Chief Human Resource Officer. The reason we're doing that is because OCRO is the main guiding entity that dispatches guidelines to other departments. And although OCRO works at a very high level, your departments might be putting in different procedures in place. So here is the latest. Obviously, there will be an eventual return to work. How that will go is dependent on many factors. So the number one is geography, right? Where you live. So, for example, if you're in downtown Montreal versus in a more isolated city, there's not the same risks of infection rates, so it's going to be different. There's also your function. So what kind of work do you do? If you're working in finance, maybe your work can be performed via telework. You don't need to actually go in physically into the office. So that's another factor to be considered. The third factor is office space. So is your office equipped to handle social distancing? So for example, if you're in activity-based workplace, or workplace 2.0, perhaps we can't actually sustain the 2 meter of social distancing. So that has to be taken into consideration as well. The fourth element to consider is also the public infrastructure. So are the trains, the buses, can you actually get to work? How about the daycare, the babysitters? Do you have a way to actually go back to normalcy? And the last one, and perhaps the most important factor to consider, is what is each employee's individual circumstances? So perhaps you're taking care of someone who's more vulnerable and you're more at risk because of that. Perhaps in your province, they have an open daycare. So everyone could have a specific situation. So although we don't know when the return to work is going to happen, these are the 5 things that would be considered to be assessed. So although you might be an FI that does the same work as someone else, but the different city and their circumstances might be different, it'll really be a case city by city, function by function, based on those 5 elements. I wish I could give you a better answer in terms of a date or exactly how it's going to happen, but it's simply not there yet. We are still working with OCRO to fine-tune the details. One thing that is certain is will be a gradual return to work to test things out. I'll give an example. If everyone were to return to work, even if half the employees, if we're going to elevators, you can't really maintain a 2 meter distance in an elevator, so that's very difficult. So perhaps there'll be people working on various schedules. And for most of our members, and I could say this pretty safely, and I've mentioned this before, but it's important to repeat it. I believe most of us can still telework for most of the duties that we have, and that's a good thing. A lot of members have reached out to us in the past and said, I'm not allowed to telework. I think my boss doesn't think I could do my duties. But with COVID-19, we've really had an opportunity to showcase that we can perform our duties in various ways. I also want to give you an update on the email we're going to be sending out to you guys about the other paid leave, the 699. A lot of people were asking, is there a cap on it? There is no cap. But there's something that has changed recently with Quebec and BC reopening the daycares and elementary schools, is that in the past, if you were unable to go to work because, for example, you had your kids or you were taking care of someone, you could use the 699 by default. You had to talk with your manager, but it was allowed. This new direction by OCRO where it says if your daycares are reopening and you voluntarily choose not to put your kids in daycare, perhaps 699 wouldn't be approved. So this is a discussion you need to have with your manager. I will tell you personally, I would have to seriously consider the circumstances of my school if I had kids, of would I let them go or not, even though it's reopening. But that doesn't mean I qualify for 699. So your relationship with your manager is important. I will tell you this, if the employer is denying your 699 leave, or again, if you feel like you're being treated unreasonably, please contact us at ACFO. You can talk to someone like Grant or Danielle or any other one of our labor relations advisors. They can help you and really assess your individual circumstances, because often we want generic advice, but like some of you give out tax advice, you need to know exactly what the situation is. So we are here for you. That's the message. Return to work will happen. We are working with the employer, and we'll be sending out an email within the next couple of hours here. Let me explain again the way it's going to work for the questions. As usual, you know we love using Slido. So Slido, how's that work? You go on slido.com, S-L-I-D-O. You put in the magic code or password, which is ACFO-ACAF, which you see on the screen right now. I can see some of you are used to this because you've already populated some questions, so thank you for doing so. So we will be taking the questions at the end of the presentations. Again, as I mentioned, we'll have Grant and Danielle give you some details about various staffing mechanisms at your disposal. So I'll leave it at that for now. Again, slido.com. And the code is ACFO-ACAF. You can ask your questions at any time. It's anonymous, and you guys can vote up your questions. All right, without further ado, I will toss it over to Grant Boland, who really outlined perhaps the staffing complaint process. Grant, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Danny. What I'll do is I'll walk you guys through the formal staffing complaint process, and I'll take you back to 2003. Which is when the Public Service Modernization Act came into force, and as part of that Modernization Act, there was changes to the staffing regime. One of the key changes was that moved from an appeals-based system to the current system that we have now, which is a complaint-based system for internal advertised positions, which is what I'll be describing here for you. One of the consequences of that change from appeal to complaint is it really greatly limited employees' ability to challenge competitions and set kind of a very rigid framework for how you could, the grounds by which you could complain. And essentially there's just three or four different types of complaints that you can file and reasons why you could file them. So you could file a complaint if you were an unsuccessful candidate in a competition. You could file a complaint if you were in the area of selection for a non-advertised process. And you can also file a complaint if your position was revoked as a result of a successful complaint that was filed against a competition that you were involved in and successful in. And you could file those based on an abuse of authority would be the grounds. And so your question would be, and that we get often in labor relations is like, how do you define what an abuse of authority is? And those, it does include things like you would think like bad faith or personal favoritism, but it could also include serious errors, administrative errors, or omissions in the process. And those aren't defined in the Public Service Labor Relations Employment Act, but they are defined, they become defined through jurisprudence. And you guys are probably familiar with what jurisprudence is. It's sort of when courts make decisions, and in this case, it's the Federal Public Service Labor Relations and Employment Board who hears these cases, and they make decisions based on cases that are brought before them. And then the decisions become part of the public record, and they become part of the jurisprudence. So when future cases are brought forward, labor relations advisors and employees, when they're arguing their cases, make reference to these other cases, and then to try to convince the adjudicator to rule in their favor. And that's probably an important reason why you would only want to go forward with strong, good cases, because the more cases that go forward which have bad, don't go forward based on good merits, you establish sort of a stronger and stronger weight of jurisprudence that work against employees. And that's in fact what has happened over the last 10, 15 years, as there's been a lot of cases that have gone forward and the employer has won the vast majority of them. So now when we go forward with cases, we have a lot of, there's a lot of cases that the employer and their counsel can rely upon in their arguments. Now, ACFO, I think, has been really a good example of a union which has tried to bring forward only the strongest cases which have the most merit. But not every union has done this. There's a lot of unions that will simply go forward based on a policy. They will go forward with every case that's brought before them. And so there's really there's a really high percentage. It's well over 90% of cases that are won by the employer. And I haven't looked at I don't think they published the statistics on this, and I haven't looked at the cases, but for quite a long time, there was less than 10 cases that had been successful at what was previously called the Public Service Staffing Tribunal, but is now now ruled by the Employment Board. So that's I'm talking about less than 10 cases and hundreds of cases that have been brought before the board. I just wanted to return. I actually had forgotten one thing which I wanted to mention, which is related to this. It's you can file a complaint if you are laid off. So there are, most of you will remember DRAP and the SURLO processes which came out of DRAP. And so when we had a number of employees, ACFO employees, and certainly many in the federal public service who filed complaints related to SURLO competitions. And I will tell you that those cases are still being heard and scheduled in 2020. So that's DRAP took place in 2013, 2014, that range, 2015. And those cases are only now coming before the board in 2020. So this will give you a sense of how long it takes for the wheels of justice to turn. So you might be wondering why you would even go forward with a complaint at that point, and there are really good reasons, in fact, why you might still want to go forward. And I think probably the most important one is based on principle. If you thought that, if you based on principle, you felt that it was important, and ACFO felt that that we should go forward, then we should. If we have a strong winning case and we weren't able to mediate something. And I'll just provide you one quick example for a case that I argued on behalf of a member about 10 years ago. And I won't mention the member's name, although I don't think she would mind if I did. And it's in the public record, as I mentioned. And it related to a competition that person was involved in, that they applied for and they were eliminated from at the interview stage. And what had happened was probably a case which many of you might be familiar with. It was somebody who had been acting in a job for a considerable period of time, and the department wanted to. They really did want to just sort of appoint that person indeterminately. So they ran a competition, and they ran it so fast that the HR representative for the department admitted in cross-examination that she had never seen a competition in her career run so quickly. And I'll forget some of the key details here probably, but essentially they went through like an exam period in the course of a week, and then they went through the interview process in the course of about 2-3 days. our member was not available on, let's say, a Friday and asked to be rescheduled to the Monday for her interview, and they said it wasn't possible, and they eliminated them from the competition based on their not being available for one day. So we filed a complaint. That complaint went through mediation, and we weren't able to successfully mediate anything. And it went forward to the staffing tribunal, as it was called at the time. And the board, the adjudicator, upheld the complaint. And now that complaint does exist in the public record, you know, and it has been relied on by other cases. So there's been other unions, when they have argued their cases, that have been able to refer specifically to that case. So that's how jurisprudence works. You know, that's a benefit for not just for ACFO members, but for every public servant, that the ground rules are clearer for what is not allowed when you are running a competition. Now, I should also say that this is a bittersweet victory in some ways, because you don't achieve anything. You don't, for yourself, you don't get anything. You know, in this case, the competition or the employee who was appointed in that position their appointment was revoked by the board, and they had to rerun the competition, and our member was able to apply for that competition. But that's about the best you can win through this years-long process that you would be devoting time and energy towards. And it's also bittersweet for ACFO as well too, because this was the person whose appointment was revoked was also an ACFO member. So we are not in the business of having our member revoking the appointments of our members for things where they have done no wrong. And in this case, it was through no fault of the employee that they had ended up in that situation. It was just sort of a gross wrongdoing on the part of the department. So these are not great victories that we achieve here, although hopefully they do provide a benefit for employees in the public service. And then sort of finally, I guess the one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to advise anyone who is considering to file a complaint to contact ACFO, contact us early, because there are important timelines that are associated with filing a complaint. And we have had members, unfortunately, have contacted us the night before the deadline to file a complaint. It's very difficult for us to provide like a good level of feedback and assistance when we have only a very short period of time to review the facts. So there is an excellent document that's produced by the Federal Public Service Labor Relations and Employment Board, and it is called the Procedural Guide for Staffing Complaints. And it's about 45 pages long, but it's really informative in terms of the steps that you need to take when you're filing a complaint, walks you through every step of the process, the disclosure phase, exchange of information, all the timelines that are important, shows you what a hearing room would look like, gives you a really good sense of what the process would look like for you. So that's a really great resource. And if you just Google that, Procedural Guide for Staffing Complaints, you'd find it very helpful. But again, just please contact us even if you have any questions about what the process would look like. And at this point, we'll throw it to Danielle. Danielle was going to talk to you a little bit about what the informal process might look like.
Sure. Okay. But before I start, Danny, did you have something that you wanted to address?
No, it's fine. Danielle, go ahead. I'll mention it afterwards. Go ahead.
Okay. So perfect. So we heard from Grant about the formal process, and I just wanted to turn your minds a little bit to some of the other recourse mechanisms that we can assist with, and that's through the informal channel. I'm a big advocate, and so are all of my colleagues at ACFO, of trying to resolve things informally. There's quite a value-added results that we can find through addressing issues informally. There is a time and a place for the formal mechanism, but oftentimes we can get more information, better results by trying to explore informal resolution. That's not to say that we're going to get you that position, that promotion, that acting appointment, or that assignment. But it will, having informal discussions and trying the informal channel will allow you to get more information into the process. It may open up some new opportunities and new challenges for you, positive challenges. And it'll help you get a better sense, usually, of the reasons why, or the reason why the manager chose the way they did. When you go through the formal process, you spend several years waiting for the hearing. And in the meantime, and throughout the hearing, you don't necessarily get a sense of why the manager chose to do what they did, or why the department chose specific staffing actions. And so it usually leaves everybody still wondering, still unsatisfied with the result. So we do like to encourage informal resolution. What does that look like? Again, we can't necessarily get you the position, but we can encourage these discussions. So typically what we'll do is get on the phone with labor relations once we hear from a member about a specific staffing concern, and we ask them straight up questions about the process. And we've had members contact us for a variety of different staffing concerns, everything from non-advertised appointments. Why did the manager choose to go non-advertised? I was really looking forward to competing for that, and I'm disappointed I didn't get a chance. Or there's a trend of non-advertised within this unit or within this department. Why is that happening? To a member being eliminated from a specific process, and the member feels that they were unjustly eliminated. Or the member has been eliminated from multiple processes. They feel that they're a target, and that they're being unfairly evaluated, and they want to get a better understanding why. Another situation that we often get calls or emails from members on is several staffing actions within a unit, within the department, within a section. And we get multiple members calling us saying, look, something's going on with this staffing action. We're not quite sure. It feels like there's a lack of transparency and openness, and they've got the person they want for the position, and they tailor the merit criteria for that specific person. We feel it's unfair. It's starting to affect staff morale. What can you do to help us? So and that's just to name a few, but these are typical situations where members will give us a call and ask for our help. And we can explore formal staffing recourse, but informally, some of the things we can do is try to open up the floor for discussion. So the first thing we recommend, for example, if you've gotten eliminated from one staffing process, the first thing you want to do is have that informal conversation. That's the best thing you can do to get a better sense and understanding of what happened. And we'll be armed with information following that informal discussion to determine whether or not it's the right approach to either file a complaint formally or to try to resolve informally. So if we take that example and we go to this informal session, what I always try to coach members and prep them on before they attend these meetings, and this goes for any meeting with your manager, any meeting where you want to open up about feeling that you've been pushed to the side, you felt unheard, you felt treated unfairly. You typically, it's human nature for us to go in and want to prove our point. We want them to understand, and we want them to accept and agree that we're right and we've done the right thing, and that they've done the wrong thing and that they need to fix that. But what I would encourage you to do instead is to approach these meetings with curiosity and an open mind, because information is power. So if we approach these meetings, instead of going into the meeting and the goal in our mind is to make them understand our point and to make them reconsider this offer, if we approach it that way, they're going to be defensive, and they're going to come back at you to prove to you that what they've done is appropriate. So you're not going to get anywhere. It will be a stalemate. They're going to prove their point. You're going to prove yours, and nobody's going to get more information. The communication will break down. But if you approach the meeting with curiosity and an open mind, and with the goal of obtaining information, you are most likely going to come out of that with a great benefit of additional information that you may not have been aware of. You may even open doors for other opportunities. That manager may also give you some tips and some strategies to help better prepare you for the next staffing action. They may be able to suggest training, or may be able to suggest tools that can help you improve for your next interview, for your next exam. There are so many value-added benefits to trying to approach these meetings with an open mind and curiosity. Trying to prove our point will not get us anywhere, is I guess the point where I'm trying to get at, is that there's usually behind every staffing action, there's a willingness to understand and a goal to get a new opportunity for either a promotion or even if it's a lateral move. And you're not going to get that by going in very defensively. So first thing I like to coach members on is that try to approach it with curiosity and an open mind. And the other thing I would suggest is trying the informal route. So whether it's having this informal meeting and then coming back to us and saying, you know what, I still feel like something wasn't right. Here's the information I received from that informal meeting. What's our next step? What can we do? Then we can evaluate together and explore whether formal recourse is what makes the most sense. Or we can try to involve labor relations at that point. Sometimes managers have the best intentions, but they fail to see that perhaps the strategy or the approach they took was perceived in a very negative light by other people, and it's affecting staff morale. And so by involving labor relations and trying to have another discussion with the whole group or explaining our concerns to labor relations, then at that point, labor relations can have a discussion with the manager and help coach them to improve themselves for the next staffing action. Through a formal recourse, you're years before you get a decision. So in the meantime, that manager is repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And managers are human like anybody else. So let's give them a chance to improve and make better decisions for the next staffing process. And you'll get that through open dialogue, open communication, giving them the heads up. And it doesn't have to be contentious. It can be simply, look, did you think about this? And here's how some of the employees have perceived the staffing action and the staffing process. What if you did this next time? What if we suggest this, or involve the union? We've had cases where, personally, I've had members call me about a staffing action, and I've gotten on the phone directly with the manager, because usually we deal with labor relations, but sometimes the managers want to talk to us directly, and we're open to that. And I was honest with that manager, and I said, look, here's what happened and here's what came out of it. And the manager was shocked because they thought they were doing right by their employees and didn't see how it could have been perceived differently. And they walked away from that meeting with so much added information. And the next time they had a staffing competition, I got a call before the staffing competition went out, and the manager ran by me what they felt was a good approach to take and wanted to get my take on how the members would perceive it. So to me, that's a success story, and that's not something you're going to get through a staffing action. So another example, so that's talking about, let's say, a situation where one employee has been eliminated from one staffing process. Let's say that that same employee has now been eliminated from several staffing processes. They're feeling targeted. What do we do in that case? Again, informal meeting, first thing, we want to get that information, get as much information out of that person as we can by approaching it with curiosity, with open-ended questions, as opposed to trying to prove our point. Because the chances of you getting included into that staffing action or being reconsidered if you walk in there defensively are slim to none. But if you approach it openly, there's a possibility that they may reconsider. But you've been eliminated now from several staffing actions. What do? We go to that informal meeting, we get the information, and then together we evaluate the trends. What's been happening? And usually we can get a sense of either a lack of, there's one merit criteria that's missing, or there's something that needs to be improved. And sometimes it's not anything to do with that. And sometimes the reality is that there's a conflict. There's a deep-seated conflict there that has actually nothing to do with staffing, and we need to address that. And then we involve labor relations. We work very collaboratively with them, and we can get the manager involved and have open discussions about, you know, the toll it's taking on the employee to be continuously eliminated from these processes, and how can management help. And I've had personally cases where we've met with the manager, and the manager offered coaching to that employee. They beefed up the training for that employee in the areas that were slightly weaker, and helped prepare them before their next interview to gear them for success. And the next time they did a staffing process, they were successful. So again, something that's very beneficial through informal mechanisms. And then if it is a question of a deep-seated conflict, then we explore other options, because it really has nothing to do with the staffing. It has something to do with something completely different. So we need to explore that. One example I wanted to give very quickly, I'm conscious of the time, is a case we had in one of the regions. In one of the regions, there had been multiple non-advertised staffing processes. There were some advertised staffing processes as well, but many members had contacted me saying that they felt that the staffing processes were being targeted to specific employees and that they weren't being given an opportunity to compete, and they felt that that was very unfair. I got on the phone with Labor Relations, and we had an honest discussion, and we agreed to meet with the employees in that region. I went out to the region and we heard the employees' concerns, and then I took all of those employees' concerns back to Labor Relations and the manager, the hiring manager, and we sat in a room together and we hashed it out, and we talked about all the concerns the employees had. The manager had no idea, because the manager was working in a different location. And that manager really appreciated getting the feedback and getting a better pulse of what was happening in her unit. And this is only because the members contacted us for information. Had those members filed staffing complaints, perhaps we wouldn't have gotten that information to the manager, and things wouldn't have improved in that region. So again, it's simply to say that informal recourse mechanisms have their place. Formal recourse mechanisms have their place too. And when you're unsure about what steps to take, contact us, and we'll happily go through the options with you and coach you one way or the other, and provide you with our advice. Ultimately, it's your decision how you want to address the situation. It's your career. Our goal is always to try to encourage fostering positive working relationships, so that you have as many open doors as possible to get that promotion and get that position that you're looking for, get that change and that challenge that you're looking for. So that's about it that I wanted to mention. I think I have a couple other examples, but I know that we have quite a few questions, so I'll pass it back to Danny, and then we'll get into the questions.
Merci beaucoup, Grant et Danielle. Listen, friends, staffing is something that is important, because it affects all of you at some point in your career. And I'm sure all of you at some point have seen a competition where you saw it didn't pass the smell test, and you're wondering what's the best approach to speak up. So we've heard two versions here. Grant explained the formal staffing complaint, and I will tell you, and I can say this because I'm an F5 like you guys. Do not file a formal staffing complaint unless you have the proof. I'm reminded of one of my favorite movies, Training Day with Denzel Washington, where he says, it doesn't matter what you know, it matters what you can prove. If you don't have proof, don't bother. It'll take years. You're unlikely to win. Even if you do win, you're not going to get the job. And fourth, you're probably going to fear some reprisals. So I'm not saying formal complaints are not good. I'm saying under certain circumstances, should you use them. So contact us. I think Grant and Danielle both said it. If you're feeling something that's unfair, contact us. We can assess your situation and determine the most appropriate course of action. One of the things that's unfortunate is that staffing is not inside the collective agreement. I wish it were, but it's not. So we are very limited. The employer has more leverage than we do on staffing. So we got to be very surgical in our approach. Filing complaints right away against a manager is not necessarily the best approach. So the informal one is the one that by far delivers the best results. But again, you have to be careful. One of the things I once said is if you are a member, if you're an employee and you're adding value and you have a positive attitude, you will never have to worry about a competition. You will be promoted as by your good work and positive attitude. The way I say those two things is because some of our members are great workers and they'll see someone else be promoted before them. And they say, why was Danny promoted to an FI3 when I worked 10 times more than Danny? Well, perhaps Danny has a better attitude. He's networking more. He's more well-known. And I'm not saying that's fair, but this is the way it works right now. And this is becoming more and more obvious. to the point that we've created now, and we sent an email, I think it was yesterday, we've created a tool for you guys to anonymously report anything that you believe is a bit fishy. We're calling it the confidential reporting tool. And Joe, perhaps you can show on the screen there. There we go. So this tool allows you guys to inform us of any competition or appointment that you've seen that is not kosher. So all you got to do is you would give us a competition number, you give us the details, and this is completely anonymous, so we won't even know you submitted it. And the reason why we wanted to put an anonymous tool is I know some of you guys fear reprisal. Well, when you contact ACFO, it is confidential. We would never contact the employer without your permission, but not all of our members know this, so we put an anonymous tool out there. You can do this with staffing actions or any type of contract you see. Sometimes there's consultants that come in to do the work of our members, and our members are saying, why did we hire this consultant? I mean, they're essentially doing our work. So you have a way now to flag it to us anonymously. I definitely would recommend you do it through an email so we can ask you questions if we have more questions. But if you don't feel comfortable, you can do it anonymously. And this will allow us to determine and detect trends. It is so important that the more of you speak up, the more we can step in. And that will lead me to the first question that we have on here. And again, for the questions, if you go on slido.com, the code is ACFO-ACAF. One of the questions, the first one is, what are the percentage of non-advertised versus advertised? Are there a significant variance between departments? I'm happy this question would ask because this is something ACFO looked into. Ever since there's a new directive on staffing, basically the employer can decide if they go advertised or non-advertised. It's much easier to go non-advertised because it's quicker and you can basically appoint whoever you want as long as they meet the essential requirements of the job. There has been an increase. So 3 years ago, the stat was 21% of appointments were done via non-ad. Today, it is 41. Actually, let me go check that stat just to make sure. Sorry, 3 years ago was 24%. Last year, it was 41%. So there was an increase from 24% to 41% of non-advertised competitions. And that is a staggering result over a 3-year period. At this trend, if it continues, I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes 60 and 70% of promotions are non-advertised. The problem with the non-advertised is essentially everyone qualifies for the job, right? Most of you have performed the function, and it's easy to qualify to actually get the essential requirements. But not everyone is giving a fair chance, and even more so in the region. So you can imagine if you come back from vacation and you learn that Danielle Viel was given a promotion and you said, well, Danielle is very qualified. I think she's fantastic, but I never got a chance to compete for this job, and I think I'm equally qualified. So for us, we want to make sure that when the non-advertised is used, it's used for the right reason. And there are some reasons where you could use a non-advertised. So for example, if I have a very specific knowledge in system implementations of SAP and I've been doing that for 20 years, I might have a very specific and narrow skill set that would warrant a non-advertised. But when I see that 41% of competitions for our members, this is not just for the public servants, this is for our members, for FIs, is non-advertised, this scares me. Going back to the question in terms of, are departments different? Absolutely. We asked for this data, and we asked for the 20 departments to give us those stats. There are some departments that are higher. Some departments use non-advertised 80% of the time, while others you only use it 20% of the time. So non-advertised are happening. This is why it is so important to maintain good relationships. Now, I'm not saying have a lack of integrity and be a brown noser. I'm not saying this. I'm saying add value, have a positive attitude. And if you are screened out of a competition, do not come in guns blazing. Ask for the feedback. And sometimes you won't even get the right feedback that you should be getting. So when you feel something is wrong, contact us so we can coach you. But the last thing I recommend is to scream and shout and file complaints everywhere, because then you will be seen as a problem and you're unlikely to actually get that promotion. And I know the employer won't say that, but I've seen this happen. Generally speaking, competitions are well done, but you'll have one of those scenarios every once in a while where you from the inside can see that something doesn't pass a smell test. And that's where you should definitely contact us at ACFO. Grant, maybe I'll send it over to you for the question about people that are acting for more than a year. And before I send it to you, I'll say on this one, we've seen this as well. So again, you guys are in the grassroots. You're in the departments. ACFO has a staff of 15 employees. We're in Ottawa. We're not in all your departments. We need your intel to flag things like this. So I've seen cases of acting of 4 months was renewed every 4 months, but we just changed the position number. And now we can say, oh, it's a different position. It's the same job, a different position. So Grant, what about when someone doesn't meet the language requirements? What would you advise a member do in that case?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first of all, the first thing to do, I would say, before taking any action would be to contact us, and we'd walk, everything is a case-by-case situation, so we'd be able to walk the member through their various options at this point. Generally speaking, once it's beyond 4 months, it is an appointment, and it should be posted, and people should have a right of recourse at that point. There have been some COVID-related temporary changes, which have permitted departments to go beyond the 4 months for issues like language. But you know, there could also be some serious concerns here. And Danny mentioned some. There's the common example that we've always had is somebody would be acting for 4 months less a day. They would take a day off, and then the department would put them in again. And that situation could exist for, we've certainly seen examples of for years. People have been acting. There's been people who've been even acting into the FI group who don't meet any of the qualifications for being an FI, but departments have tried to work around that by using tricks like going 4 months less a day off, and then 4 months less a day. So we would, depending upon the situation, we're gonna choose an approach tailored to what the member wants, and how it's and what we think we're missing in terms of background. We may contact labor relations at the department itself to try to gather more information and maybe alert them to a problem that exists, a manager that is exploiting the system to their advantage. So it really is a case by case, and I would strongly encourage anybody who notices a situation like this to contact us, and if they want to do it anonymously, they can do it through the new tool that we've developed. I'll send it back to you, Danny.
Thanks, Grant. Danielle, before I send it over to you regarding the PMA question, I'll take this question on return to work and how do we determine who comes in first? The employer has not made that clear yet, but I would assume if I had to, the function would be one of the main things, right? So who performs the critical work? Not many of our members are performing critical work. And again, I need to clarify that. We perform important work, but not critical. No one's going to die if we don't roll out a financial report or we don't release something, right? So I would suspect that there will be a plan of which functions need to be coming back to work. Now, a function might be critical, but you can perform it from home, telework. So there's no rush on physically bringing people to work in the office space unless they really need to. So for an example of that is, if someone's working in a warehouse, they need to physically work in the warehouse to perform their duties. So, but I think the person was asking the question to know where we would fit on that return to work. And if I had to guess, and this hasn't been determined yet, I believe our members would not be one of the first. If I had to guess, probably on the second tier, second half, I would say, sorry. And that will also depend on the region and which department you're in. So can't say for sure now, it has not been determined, but more information will come. It will be different for every region, every department. Danielle, over to you for the question about after a person makes it into a pool for promo, can a hiring manager request the previous year's PMA in order to give someone a letter of offer?
So the quick answer is yes on that one. Again, if you have concerns, feel free to give us a call individually. But even though you've been placed into a pool, if the manager is picking you out of that pool, they can add additional screening tools if they wish. So if they want, and more we are seeing managers utilizing the PMA tool because it is a government-wide tool. So managers can request previous year's PMAs, and that's why the PMA discussion is an important one to have, and contact us for those as well. We can coach you through those and help ensure that your PMAs properly reflect the hard work that you're doing. But yes, absolutely, they could, if they wanted to validate through a PMA, they can ask for one.
Thanks, Danielle. And this is a good question because I think not everyone is aware of this, how important your PMAs are. I remember back when I was at PSPC, we had PMAs, but to be honest, I really didn't care much about them because they didn't really serve any purpose. I didn't think so. But now that we know that your PMAs can be brought up 2 or 3 years to assess your performance for an interview now, you have to make sure that they are done well, professionally, but they definitely reflect all the work that you've done. So if you think you should be a Succeed Plus and the employer only gave you a Succeed, reach out to us. And again, you got to be delicate about this, right? You can't say, well, this is BS. You guys are not giving me my due. No, you got to be careful how you word it. And this is when you have a chance to highlight what you've done, write it down throughout the year. I mean, we have a totally separate presentation on PMAs, which you could probably do on one of these webinars, because it's so important to make sure they're done properly. Grant, over to you for the question about the what happened to the merit principle. Is it no longer what you know that gets you promoted, but who you know?
I mean, I think we get this question quite often in various forms, and I guess I would just say, based on my experience, that I don't disagree with this. I think it's at least anecdotally, you know, of course, in my role, I hear more of the horror stories than the success stories within the public service, but I certainly hear a lot of horror stories of the misapplication of merit in the public service. And my own personal opinion about what's happened is that managers, departments have realized the kind of flexibility that they now have under the legislation, and so they've sought to exploit it. So that's why you would see, for example, a rise in non-advertised. That's why you would see some of these competitions which are being run in non-transparent ways. I think that they've just recognized at this point that they can get away with it. And what to do about that, I think, is a very big, important question, which I don't really have the answer to. I mean, it's all governed by legislation. So I think, you know, some of the roles that ACFO plays in terms of lobbying, you know, appearing at committees, raising the issues to members of parliament. I mean, it will be changed through acts of legislative change, unfortunately. So that takes a while, and I'm not optimistic, to be honest, that it's because I believe that departments think that this process is working. It's certainly working to their advantage.
Thank you, Grant. And this next question is more of a comment, but I'll definitely comment on this one. The comment is, many FIs work extremely hard, have a positive attitude, go beyond the call of duty, only to be ignored when being staffed from a pool. Staffing is broken. Staffing is definitely broken. I completely agree with you. It takes way too much time to staff a position, and that is why a lot of managers prefer the non-advertised, because they don't have 6 months to wait before they staff. This is something that ACFO and other unions actually went in front of Parliament Hill to testify of what we recommend. One of the things I would tell you guys, if you are adding value, you're working hard, you have a positive attitude, and you feel you're being passed over for promotions, bring that up politely. I would say at your year-end beginning or end, your year performance at the beginning or the end. And the way you can bring that up is ask your manager, do you feel I'm ready for a promotion, right? Not, I know I'm ready for a promotion, or do you feel anything I'm lacking before I'm ready to go to the next step? The reason you do that is for two things. One is you're letting your manager know I'm interested in being promoted. And two, you now know if they would give you a good reference or not. Sometimes you're ready, you're able, but your manager doesn't think you're ready. And when they call to the reference, after you've gone through the whole process, that reference that was not the best cuts you out of the process. So that's a way to bring that up. And if you feel like your manager, for some reason, is saying, well, I won't tell you why you're not ready, but you're not ready, contact us. If you're having Succeed Plus, if there's opportunities that you're being kicked out of, definitely contact us so we can coach you on how to have that conversation without being adversarial. That is so key. We do not want to be adversarial, because the more you blow, scream and shout, the less likely you are to get the promotion, even though you might be right. You got to do it delicately, very delicately. Next question we have is, given the COVID situation, telework, can we anticipate that future staffing actions will move towards eliminating restrictions on an employee's location? This is a very good point. Not only for the people in the regions, but also in the NCR, if you want to move a different location. COVID-19 is terrible, and I wish it never happened. However, one of the silver lining will be that I believe this will allow our members to telework more often, but also the area of selection might be expanded because now we are showing that our members could perform their duties from pretty much anywhere in the world without affecting the performance. A caveat on that would be when it comes to hiring a new person, right? You can imagine someone doing their new duties. If you've just started, you might need to be trained and shadowed and whatnot. But someone has been doing the same job for 5 or 10 years and has shown during the process they have the same output and performance, they're more than likely to do so when they continue. A question about what percentage of non-advertised are FI1s, FI2s, FI3s, and FI4s. See, that's what I love about you guys. You want the numbers. Give me the numbers. We actually don't ask those numbers. We didn't ask them because we did an ATIP. We kept it very high level. We didn't want to have a breakdown because the more detailed we get, the longer it takes. And it took about 13 months to get access to the information that we actually received. So we don't have that one. I would tell you the higher you go, the more non-advertised they are, because if you're an FI1, they don't really know you yet. 3s and 4s, that's where you're managing people. They would pretty much handpick you, but that's just my best guess. What's the latest on the plans for returning to work now that provinces are starting to open up? I think I've already answered that one, so I'll skip this one. Some employees use process as a VO to appoint someone they already have in mind, technically advertised, but essentially not advertised. Can you comment? Absolutely. Yes, this will happen. You've seen this. Look, we had a whole networking night about do's and don'ts and information that is not shared when you apply for a competition. So when you see a poster for a competition, we all focus on the essential merits, right? Okay, you need to have an undergrad, you need to, that's fine. What it should also say is, are you well liked? Are you adding value? Is there anyone that hates you in the hiring process? I know that's not fair, but this is how it works in the real life. I've seen people that hired their brother-in-law, their ex-coworkers, all that non-advertised. It has to be something transparent, and it is not. We will tell you, oh, your critical thinking, well, you didn't give the best answer. It has nothing to do with that. It's because someone wants to hire their brother-in-law, and that's why they give him the job. Those are difficult to prove, but that's why we're depending on your intel to actually give us information. All right, so I'm talking a lot now. I'll throw it over to Grant or Danielle. Any question you saw there that you would like to take?
Yeah, so I can take the next one on will informal discussions protect members from passive-aggressive behaviors from supervisor, manager, designed to punish the member for speaking to the union? So we do get this question a lot, and it's not only for staffing, it's for any conflict, any situation they bring to our attention. Members are often reticent to come and speak to us. What I always try to encourage members to do is to have faith in us and in the system. We pride ourselves on having built really collaborative professional working relationships with our labor relations counterparts in various departments. So we have quite a good working relationship with most of them, if not all of them. And we have good relationships with managers. So what does that mean? That means that when we approach our labor relations counterpart on a situation, they're not defensive. And sometimes they are. And sometimes what I find really funny is the first time I speak to a labor relations advisor that I've never spoken to before, they're automatically very defensive and on guard about me contacting them. But within the first 5 minutes, all of that dissipates because they know that what we're doing is trying to work with them to find a solution for everybody's best interest. So in most of the files that I don't think I've ever had an employee come back to me. I've been with ACFO since 2010. And I've never had an employee come back to me and say that they've been negatively impacted by having contacted the union when I've intervened for them and with them because of this approach that we take. Our goal is not to punish the employer or the manager and blame them, because we know that's not going to work for you long term. So it is a stigma that's out there. We're trying to break that down. And I think we're doing a good job once we get on the phone with our counterparts. But we need to have that opportunity, and you have to give us that trust and know that if ever, we can't control every situation. So if ever there is a situation where a manager is unhappy that you contacted the union, well, we can try to find a solution to help improve that situation. nobody should have to suffer by contacting the union. And I would say it's a very, very different environment than if you're dealing with some of the more aggressive unions. Back to Danny.
Merci, Danielle. Such great advice. Look, you want to get us involved, friends, because we can remove the scent from you, right? We can ask questions. So I'll give you an example. If Grant Bolin were to be promoted, and someone and three other coworkers say, look, Grant is a great guy, but we don't understand why he got the job and we didn't. We all do the same job. We're all qualified. ACFO can, on your behalf, without naming names, can approach the hiring manager and say, hey, I see Grant Bolin was promoted here. Congratulations, it's great. I'm just wondering what assessment criteria was used to ensure that Grant, and then often the employer comes back and says, oh, Grant Bolin meets all the essential requirements. And then we will say, oh, we know he does, and we're sure he's good, but there are other people in the same team that also met the essential requirements, and they were not given the same opportunity to compete. The reason we ask the questions is to act as a deterrent for future competitions. Once a manager knows that the union is looking into their hiring practices, they are 10 times less likely to do it again. And I've seen this happen time and time again. When they know that we are looking into them, they're saying, uh-oh, I need to be careful because the union is going to come back to me. So they've got to make sure that they're really operating the way they should. Not saying that they're not doing the right thing, but it acts suspicious if you keep on promoting people that came from your old team, for example, right? Grant, I'll throw it over to you for this anonymous staffing complaint, but before I'll take this question that says, are most jobs at the senior FI level, FI3, FI4, CBC requirement, or is it common to find English or only BBB at this level? I mean, again, depends on your department, on your region, and on the position. I would say, I don't have the stats on this, I had to guess, and Danielle and Grant, feel free to step in if you think I'm wrong. I would say in the NCR, FI3s and FI4s, the majority would be CBC. Perhaps not in the regions, but the more you go up, the more CBC becomes a requirement. And I know for many of you, you might not have your CBCs and your employer will not allow you to have language training. If that's the case, contact us, right? If the only thing you put in your learning plan is language training and the employer says no, and you don't think it's reasonable, contact us, right? I mean, I know you all love courses of the Canada School, but if the only thing you want and the only hindrance to your career progression is language, the employer should facilitate that if you're meeting all your requirements and your performance assessment. So it's definitely something worth contacting us for. Grant, over to you for the question. Can I file an anonymous staffing complaint?
No, you can't as such. You must identify yourself to the board when you file a complaint. Something that's obviously a great concern for a lot of our members when they do go through that. And our members are also concerned when they see the list of people that become parties to the complaint as well too, because in addition to the management group, obviously, who are named in the complaint, there is also it does go to the deputy head as well too, and also the person that is successful in the competition also becomes a party to the complaint as well too, and they get access to all of the information that's filed and as part of the complaint, all of the allegations, etc. And the hearings are also public hearings, so anyone can walk in and attend the hearing as well too. So there's definitely no way to remain anonymous throughout that process. I think that's one reason why we have gone ahead to introduce the confidential reporting tool to give members that sort of ability to maintain their anonymity. And there's also other processes which members can take advantage of, which we haven't discussed today. For example, if you thought that there was gross wrongdoing on the part of the department, there is disclosure mechanisms available within the department. Ombuds people, and there's the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner who will receive anonymous complaints. The problem is it's much more difficult for any investigative group to handle an anonymous complaint versus one which has a name attached to it, just in terms of information gathering. So the short answer, that's the long answer. Go back to the short answer, which is no, you can't file an anonymous complaint.
Thanks, Grant. And again, it's also contact us, right? There's different recourses at your disposal, so contact us. We can guide you on this one. I saw one, Danielle, here. It said Succeed Plus. So you mentioned Succeed Plus, but where I work, it has been decided by the performance committee that everybody gets only the middle score. Any suggestions, Danielle, on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen this with a couple departments, unfortunately, and this is absolutely not the use of the PMA system. That's not how it's supposed to be used. There should never be a bell curve. There should never be a situation where all employees get the middle rating, succeed. But it happens. We've had employees get told they should have a succeed plus, but they've been told to get only a succeed. At that point, what we suggest, contact us and let's talk through the issue, and we can get involved with our LR counterparts and have them look into the issue. Sometimes the managers, they could be new managers, and they're afraid to give people succeed plus because they're afraid of what that might look like on them, and they just don't have the information that they need in order to properly assess their employees. So having LR involved in the file to help coach them and explain to them how the PMA tools should be used is often helpful. I had a case specifically where this happened. We had a member, it was at one of the bigger departments, and the manager in that unit was under the impression that everybody needed to get a succeed. And through one discussion with labor relations, the manager and the employee, we were able to open the eyes of that manager and encourage follow-up discussions with upper management to make a change to those PMA ratings, and that was done. So sometimes it's just a question of managers not being sure how to assess their employees, and they don't want to stick out one way or the other, so they play it safe. Having us involved in the file will help encourage the proper use of that PMA tool. So if anybody is having this happen to them, we encourage you to contact us, and we can work with management and LR to resolve that issue. That's not the proper use of the PMA tool.
Thanks, Danielle. I mean, look, you've all seen this. We all know this. It is much easier to give everyone a succeed, that 3, right? Because you don't have to justify that. But the minute you go to succeed minus, succeed plus, or the 1 or the 5s, it takes a lot more rigorous in your process to make a case for it. But I can assure you, there is no such thing as a cap or a limit to any one of those. And there's stats on this one. So if your manager is saying, I'd give you a succeed plus, but we're capped, I can't. That is not true. Now, they might believe that. They might have been told that. But at a departmental wide, it is not the case. So like Danielle said, contact us if you feel you're not being given full credit. We're getting close to 1 o'clock. Actually, 1 o'clock. So maybe just a couple of quick fire questions. Most unjust staffing behavior are being done by other FIs who are in management role. What do you see to be a reason? It could be many things, right? The higher up you go, the more experience you have, you're much more likely to want people that work that are like you. So we've seen complaints on discrimination, gender. There's many reasons why it could be. So I can't speak specifically to this one because I don't have the actual data. But yes, we are aware that sometimes it's other FIs that are doing this. What do I do if I've already approached my manager to help them understand that completing deadlines on it's not feasible to be used, but nothing changed? If your workload is not manageable, contact us. Absolutely, because the Office of Controller General extended the year-end deadlines by 3 weeks, and they said they'd do it even more, but they did not. So if your workload at any point during the year becomes unreasonable, contact, because if you don't contact us, you'll make mistakes. You might go on stress leave. It adds up. It snowballs. So you want to make sure you politely and professionally tell your employer, hey, you know what? I think I might have too much on my plate. What do you recommend I do in this case?
Can I just add to that, Danny? We actually have been getting a lot of files like this lately, especially because of the pandemic and juggling multiple priorities at home. So we're helping members coach them and prepare them for a discussion with their manager about how to reorganize their priorities, and also offer to be involved in that meeting. And we have, and it's usually successful. They have to be flexible. And if the manager is unable to help, then we can escalate to labor relations or the director. But absolutely, this is something we're dealing with all the time right now, and we can help with that.
Thanks, Danielle. Look, at this point, we passed our hour. So I'd like to thank again Grant Bolin and Danielle Viez. So again, they are 2 of our labor relations advisors. They can take any case. You can contact us, not just on staffing, but anything else. And I see there was a lot of questions in your performance agreement. So in the June webinars, we'll throw it out there because now, I don't know if you're aware of this, the new deadline to complete DPMA's Firmo Crew said was July 1st. So I suspect many of you will be completing not only your year-end performance, but your learning plans. So we want to give out advice to you guys. So thanks to both of you. Thanks to the staff behind the scenes that are working the webinar. I hope you appreciate this. And friends, we'll see you next Wednesday. We're talking about emotional intelligence, which really ties into staffing. We'll show you how next week. All right. Take care, friends. Bye-bye.